This is a Motorola AM-FM tube type radio, and the model number on it is 10T28M. This is very similar to the second radio model I ever bought, probably back in 1984 or 1985. The cabinet is still in my parents' attic, but the one I got back then was a blonde oak model. And I bought it for 25 cents at a flea market. But back then, there was no World Wide Web. It was real difficult for like a kid of about 7 years old to find out any information about old radios. I didn't know anybody that worked on them, and there was very little information to be found at the local public library. And I remember just being so frustrated because I couldn't figure out where the problem was in this radio about 24 years ago or so. But now I finally found one of these radios again. Of course, back then I tore everything apart. Not one part was left put together on this chassis. Everything was taken apart in an effort to just find out, well, what connects to what and what is all this stuff composed of and everything. But I still have that chassis somewhere. I think I threw the power transformer out. I think the problem with it was that it had a bad power transformer. Of course, back then it would have been real difficult to try to find one, just being a kid, not having any other radios to salvage parts from or anything. But now with the advent of the World Wide Web and being able to order things and have them come right to your door and having all that information available, it makes it so easy. And I think for young people today that are interested in radios and old equipment and things like that, it's a lot easier to get information than it was back in the 80s. Now here's a electrolytic capacitor that somebody put in there as a replacement. It's a GE service designed Alumalytic, and the date code on this, and I learned about this from a dumb musician. Sometimes they use just a 3-number date code, so you kind of have to guess what the decade is, but I think this would be from the 60s, so it would be a 1963 electrolytic. And on the can electrolytic, it said it was a 1960 date code. Just based on the styling of this looks like early 60s. But this is a real beast of a radio. Usually these kind of table radios are just a hot chassis with a 50C5 output tube. This has a really big power supply transformer. It's got a 6X4 rectifier, 6AQ5 output, 3 stages of FM/IF. The only thing it really doesn't have is an AM/RF stage. It's got a tuning eye tube, and back when I was a kid, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what this tube was supposed to do. I couldn't find it on the Radio Shack tube tester. And I'd never seen a tuning eye tube before, so I had no idea of what it does. But it's got kind of like a fan-shaped pattern that lights up green. Instead of the older eye pattern, it's got this fan that kind of expands and contracts as you get it tuned in on the station. So hopefully that tube is okay. This is one of the more rare types. Usually this type is a type that's got like a bar that gets wider or narrower, or comes together as you tune in. It's got an external speaker jack, it's got an auxiliary output, it's got an auxiliary input. There's only a few paper caps in here, so this shouldn't be too difficult of a restoration job. Just replace the electrolytics and replace the paper caps. Here's a couple of bad repair practices I found. And you know, I've yet to find one of these radios where somebody has done really good workmanship on it. So often it's just really shoddy jobs, it's bad practices, bad soldering. And here's the 2 things that are wrong. For one thing, when you have a bad electrolytic inside of a multi-electrolytic can, you do not replace only that one unit. You got to replace all the caps in that can, because if one's bad, even if the others aren't right now, they're likely to go bad. Another thing is, yeah, you don't, and for another thing, you don't ever bridge a bad electrolytic with a new one, because the old one, even if it's lower in capacitance for some reason, can have leakage where you've got too little resistance and starts to draw too much current. Another thing is, whoever did this solder joint did not file the old lead before they hooked this up, so you got a crummy connection. See how this is just kind of bending? It never made a good connection. Never ever, not back in 1963, because they didn't file it. So there's so many things I found in these things that are just like textbook examples of what not to do in repairing old radios. You always have to replace all electrolytics and make sure that connections are clean. Make sure you file the leads with a little file before you do the soldering so the solder will stick. I'm going to mount a terminal strip in here and put the new electrolytics in. Here's the underside of the Motorola chassis. Got the fuse holder installed, got 3 new electrolytics, a new FM ratio detector electrolytic, plus replaced all of the old paper caps with Mylar. Let's turn it over and we'll see how the Motorola works. Looks like the 60A5 tube is all worn out. I don't see any green glow from it.
It's active.
The Basin's new home for your country and us. Big D and Bubba in the morning. The all-new My Country 96.1.
Oh, I didn't know that station changed to country. It used to be rap and hip-hop, and now it's country. I'm trying to think, there's probably 3 or 4 other country stations around here, so I'm not sure why they need the change.
Through November 2nd, and you can win a special NASCAR race weekend. Don't miss any of the excitement from the NASCAR Sprint Cup.
Okay, let's try AM.
Your money? Write this number down. 800-430-8785. That's 8.
By the end of that year, I really did feel that that's where God was leading me, was towards ordained ministry in the Methodist Church. So I went from there to seminary and
doing 1 or 2 things every week to really hurt their chances. Last week was Greg Olson, 2 fumbles.
I'm the learning chief. Surviving was not easy as 1, 2, 3. He learned the same things the other kids would sing. The only problem was he learned them differently. Then one day, Bobby's mom called toll-free to find out more about learning disabilities. They called Bobby help, and as sure can be, the song was now sung to a different melody. There was a little boy named Bobby, a bright little boy went to school at elementary.
Prices in the nation on a huge selection of new and used.